Thank you very much.
I'm sorry for that, but Pasha told me that to try to adjust to the time because there is another activity at 7 o'clock. So we invite them, our friend, Alfredo Vega, Cabrera, Francia, Restorology, the being transdisciplinary of cultural transmission.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My experience in the conservation of cultural heritage and its link to higher education began in 2000. In 2009, two events had a profound effect on my career path. The first was becoming a part of the CIRET, and the second was the beginning of my collaboration with the Sorbonne University in France. This contribution is divided into 3 parts. In the first part, I will summarize 2 centuries of the history of conservation in order to best contextualize my work. In the second part, I will present Restorology as a transdisciplinary field of cultural transmission by way of conservation. In the third part, I will describe the challenges of cultural transmission by way of conservation. The challenges of being transdisciplinary and its meaning and higher education and see through this experience. Conservation, 2 centuries of history and the search for identity. Conserving and transmitting have been a human characteristic since the beginning of time. In the beginning of the 19th century, in the cradle of modern Western culture, conservation acquired a philosophical foundation which allowed it to distinguish itself from artisanal and artistic creation. With the development of science during the first half of 20th century, the first chemistry laboratories and the institutes specializing in the conservation of works of art were created. To treat the damage done to monuments and museum collections during war, international organizations dedicated to conservation such as the ICOMOS were created, as well the United Nations and UNESCO. In the 60s and 70s, the first specialized conservation programs in higher education following the theory of restoration of works of art that had been developed. But beginning in the 80s, the notion of cultural patrimony became more and more complex, as it became evident that any cultural action can obtain patrimonial status, thus relating it to the collective memory, identity, and well-being of a nation or culture. Cultural patrimony was then transformed into a lens by which to see the world, and imposing itself as a system that regulates the educational, cultural, economic, and touristic politics that shape society. The theory of conservation of works of art no longer sufficed, as it didn't encompass all of these objects. Emphasizing this clear identity, restorers are divided in 2 positions. Will some purport at modernist point of view and continue to believe that it is simply a question of adapting and reforming classic theory to new cultural situation. Others maintain a postmodernist point of view which highlights the impossibility of a new general theory can encompass all the difficulties conservation is presently faced with. For this reason, the postmodernists define a casuistic focus that requires the creation of a frame of reference based on the object to be restored. Today, texture reductionist and irreconcilable position are no longer equipped to answer the epistemological problems that conservation and its teaching in higher education are now fastened with. I have opted for a third position, the creation of a new way of understanding cultural transmission, contributing to the knowledge and comprehension of our civilization, but adding yet another speciality to the disciplinary Big Bang world, Binonson's sense without the transdisciplinarity. So, this third position of reconfiguration, which I have defined as Restorology, is the study of the cultural transmission that conservation brings about, but it's also the creation of a primary epistemology that searches for the first sense, perhaps, therefore, the universal sense of conservation. To resume the concept of restoration, which etymologically means to reestablish or put back on its feet, helps define Restorology as the study of that reestablishment. This primary epistemology of restoration is no longer based in external categories like patrimony or heritage, nor dependent on an interdisciplinarity focused through other fields like art history, but rather is now founded on these primary essential and now disassociated elements: the object, the subject, and the act of restoring. Creating a new understanding of these elements, it is primary challenge, but it is also its transdisciplinarity possibility. In the unification of the subject and the object drives a profound reformulation of the discipline under a new epistemological basis. Restorology then places itself beyond the objectivity required by modern science and the subjectivity imposed by a postmodernist axiology which previously caused a separation between the object and the restorer, which in turn created a rift between theory and practice. The restorative act as an update, actualization, is the meeting point where the object and the subject are united, which is to say it's the explanation of the hidden here as the giver of meaning to cultural transmission. The interaction between the object and the subject shows the transparency and transcendence opened up by this restorative act. By conceiving epistemology and ethics as liberating experiences, transdisciplinarity adds an element of human fulfillment to the discipline. The classic question about conservation, why and how do we restore, for whom do we restore, take on a new level. Restorology is made an act at the intersection where cultural process and shaped. Because of its transdisciplinary nature, Restorology is called upon to counteract the alienating usage of identity, memory, and history which blur humanity. As a transdisciplinary conception, Restorology searches to give new meaning to cultural transmission through the conservation of cultural goods based on the experiencing and on the clarity of a common planetary destiny. Restorology is therefore a communal experience and therefore also spiritual. It is thus able to create and multiply the possibilities of realizing human potential. This experience in higher education shows how the being transdisciplinary can create new ways to be a student, as a subject that takes on his or her own training as an important element of the disciplinary configuration. The conservation student then becomes a transdisciplinary being, verb and noun according to Ubiria and D'Ambrosio, always in the process of self-actualizing. In higher education, the being transdisciplinary can be understood through the monk's dreams. The challenge. Yes. The challenge of the transdisciplinary being in higher education, uniting the object and subject through a new comprehension of the restorative act, going beyond the two drift or reductionisms of objectivity and subjectivity, scientism and valuism, recovering knowledge and tradition and their inclusion in the production of knowledge, opening of new ways of thought and knowledge and two different realities through Western epistemologies known as epistemologies of the soul, arousing the desire for the kind of vision that guides students from learning to training and training production of knowledge, from production of knowledge to completion of work. In higher education, the being transdisciplinary can be understood through the monk dreams as told and illustrated by Camille Flammarion in 1888. A missionary from the Middle Age declared that he had found the point at which the sky and the hermit. To accomplish this, let us remember the meaning of the word university as universus, which means entirely or wholly. We must learn from no Western cultures whose knowledge isn't dissociated by dualisms, but which are built upon the acceptance and unification or contradiction. Isn't the notion of postmodernity proposed by Basarab Nicolescu a way towards intercultural or even universal integration and reconciliation? To conclude, I would like to read to you in Spanish, it's very easy, a poem by our dear poet Roberto Juarros that reveals in a magnificent way the irreducible character of hidden third, and which illustrates the human limits when faced with the formation of Restorology as a transdisciplinary field of cultural transmission. Entre la zona de las preguntas y la zona de las respuestas hay un territorio donde acecha un extraño brote. Toda pregunta es un fracaso, toda respuesta es otro. Pero entre ambas derrotas suele emerger como un humilde tallo algo que está más allá de los sometimientos. Thank you very much.
Claudia Cabrera, Mexico, Art and Transdisciplinary in Latin America. And from now on, I will move when you have 2 minutes left, because otherwise we're not going to finish, okay? Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. Arts in higher education. Over the last 30 years, technological world has displaced art. Technological culture excludes the real problem, while for the real problem of the countries, such as marginalization, exclusion, unemployment, racism, illiteracy, and criminality. The artistic practice and artistic education seem to be completely insignificant. Those practices are only kept as a symbolic legacy of the 19th century in place controlled by powerful cultural bureaucracies. Thus, it is needed to run another rein to the concept of art so that it continues being a space where the conscious keep awake. Disciplinary fragmentation of knowledge has been favored higher education with harmful consequences to the students and teachers, converting them in people divided and with great difficulty to relate to all that is foreign to its domain. Separation and isolation from other areas of wisdom are the principal characteristic of artistic education and research, in the research in general. This phenomena is the result of our kind of approaching the knowledge and the reality product into a rationalist and positive vision. Any change to be significant will to depart from a deep comprehension from the one who understands it and from that one that tries to change. Because of it, to speak about action to help changing the state of the artistic education implies changing, first, the way we see ourselves and how we understand knowledge. It is necessary to formulate questions, to try answers, and to do a different integration from the whole process with regards to the arts. For instance, what place do the education research, the practice of the arts in the national or local educational and scientific bodies and in the attention of the institution occupied? And which has been its role in the generation of knowledge and social transformation? According to each context, the answer may vary. Nevertheless, it may be possible to extend the access to the art, enjoyment and practice as a knowledge and human work experience by linking the straightforward effort of those dedicated to these activities in the space emerging for such efforts. Artistic higher education current model. Nowadays, the predominant model for the higher artistic education and other disciplines in Latin America is the competency-based curriculum with a pragmatic, reductionist, and technical vision whose goal is to register fragmented tasks and behaviors. Training of effective professionals qualified for the elaboration, application, and domain of techniques and procedures exclude any creative, subjective, and critical or reflexive thinking. The problem is that the instrumental rationality that supports this competency-based curriculum is oriented to dominate reality rather than to think about it. Nicolesco describes this situation, open quote, as the impoverishment of the trans-subjective dimension of the being. Its denaturalization and desecration risk increase the phenomena of irrationalism, obscurantism, and of intolerance whose human, interhuman, and social consequences are incalculable. Close quote. The epistemic level of artistic education and its social function are revealed now more than ever antagonistic. The globalization and the new liberal perspective that promotes the expansion of the educational market seeks to impose a managerial paradigm that led the marketing of the artistic education. Answering to the new cultural condition consists to placing beyond all the determinists that lead the arts to the mercantilization towards turning into turner for the alienation and submission of people, as well as considering artists and their public and privileged class. How can higher artistic education face the 21st century challenges? What reforms does the higher artistic need to order to offer an integral and open formation? Alternatives. Alternatives. In such situation, it is suitable to wonder, which are the possible alternatives? Which is the role of the institution in the area of education, research, and artistic creation facing today's challenges? What function do the arts have in its current society? How to change the vision in higher artistic education in Latin America? Is the disciplinary paradigm viable? What consequences has this paradigm generated? From my own academic experience in Mexican institution of higher artistic education, I feel the urgency to move from a disciplinary vision to a transdisciplinary one. I sustain that only with this change, artistic higher education, especially in Latin America, it will be possible to offer an integral education for solving real-world problems effectively and affectively and contribute a genuine social transformation. Considering what is happening with respect to the arts in the present century, I perceive a radical change with respect to what characterized it during most of the 20th century. Therefore, in order to initiate a dialogue among all the art from and between art and other fields of knowledge, it is urgent to lay bridges to join effectively and affectively the arts with sciences, the tradition, spirituality, and summing up with society in its multiple ways of existing. Transdisciplinarity is an epistemological proposal based on the principle of complexity that sees the advent of a human being capable of contending with everything that is between, across, and beyond what has been considered as reality. To understand its broad scope, it is necessary to apply the methodology proposed by Basarab Nicolescu, whose three pillars are level of reality, that is ontology, the included medium, that is logic, and complexity, that is epistemology. Proposal. Assuming that the purpose, the artistic education, is the elevation of the spirit to achieve it, requires linking all the knowledge and recognize that only from its human dimension will it be at the service of mankind. For a better understanding of the being and the world, artistic education must overcome the radical disjunction of knowledge across disciplines and establish bridges between them. The art, as a way of expression of human being, can exist in a horizontal plane or in the same level of reality where it responds to the inertial sequence of events. But if we take conscience of our being and the relationship that we establish with everything that we perceive, we will be able to have the experience of the cosmic and conscientious verticality. That is to say, of traveling simultaneously in several levels of reality. In this way, the union of the subject with the object, from where the hidden third immersion will be possible. This is the wall of the transdisciplinary research, as Basarab Nicolescu says. The art that are generated from, by, and for the community implies supporting the equity, the proportionality, and the cosmic and conscientious verticality. Only in this way will they be able to generate projects to live education that involve body, mind, emotion, and movement. Therefore, the construction of bridges implies a permanent exercise or caring of effective and creative accompaniment, especially participative, where the principle of inclusion and the multiple experiences practiced proper the art will be present. Hence, I also consider viable the proposal expressed by Sanchez Perez about a methodology for project as an architectural center of curriculum that, base of research become adaptable and adjust it to the needs and changeable characteristics to the educational program. The projective nature of the curriculum must try to produce a social, cultural, and educational reconstruction to turn students into real protagonists, not repeaters, not imitators, or form or established models, but others with creativity and critical thinking. And finally, transdisciplinary artistic education must be seen as a permanent exploration movement that is the result of open critical space that questions the artistic stage, its articulation with other disciplines and with life. Thank you.
Jolan Velencei, my pronunciation, from Hungary, sorry, Transdisciplinary approach in validation of relevant knowledge. Is that good? Please.
How is pronunciation of your name?
Jolan Velencei.
Jolan Velencei.
Velencei.
Okay.
Not the same that Venice. Almost the same. I'm Jolan Velencei. I'm an assistant professor in business decision making.
Use the microphone.
And it's better.
Better.
Thanks. And I'm a member of a transdisciplinary research group. The first presenter was speaking about our work. We really started to work almost 20 years ago. In that time, we worked the same university, but nowadays we work different university, both of us in Hungary and Victor in Scotland, in Glasgow University. And may I say this is a very good possibility to meet again, and really sometimes we had joint research and the possibility to work again. I teach decision making and innovation management in business development master course, and also I have a subject in our university as a doctoral school, safety and security doctoral school, and in this school I have a special subject, main validation. Sorry, this one? Okay. This course especially prepared for engineers, because safety and doctoral schools, there are only engineer PhD students, and firstly, it was very difficult to accept. Then I'd like to open and I'd like to develop a special subject for these students. The aim of my subject is try to outline the students' available knowledge, needed knowledge, and accessible knowledge. It means that, for example, available knowledge is the students' previous knowledge and the taught knowledge in this doctoral school. And the second part of this subject is the accessible knowledge. It means then, as you know, almost every PhD student, the first journal article is about literature review, and really this part the same then they need to collect the most powerful thinkers in their research area. And the third part, if the needed knowledge, it means really a gap. And in this gap, as some little circle mentioned and signed, then the PhD students really the second year need to find the question, the research question. This means then, as Victor mentioned, only one question is very important. What does it mean? Mainly if they find this question accessible knowledge, the part of accessible knowledge, or part of available knowledge, it means then, may I say, some quasi-problems, and if they find the question outside of this circle, it means, may I say, stupid or false problem. And this is the first part, this subject. Also, Victor mentioned, as I told you, that we are the same research group, then our approach is really based on Karl Popper's tentative solution, finding tentative solution. It means then maybe the first answer and the first solution not to the end, and really a research process of a research and no end. No, it started some problems and ended also some problems. And it means then sometimes very difficult to accept the PhD students. It's okay, you have to finish your work because it's 4 years for you, and maybe you have another questions, and the next research you can deal with this question. And it's very important for me that my PhD students finish their work in time, and it's very difficult to understand that research cannot end really. It's almost maybe start at the end of our life, may I say. What does it mean? That I think this all of you is well known, and especially in this subject, and engineering needs to use physics, psychology, philosophy, economy, but it's very important to be able to beyond these disciplines. And as I mentioned, firstly it was very difficult to accept my subject, but nowadays there are some students who get this subject because the other students told me maybe it could be interesting for us. The other students told me that you had another view, you can ask different questions than usually in the other subject. And I'd like to show you really a sample, because to outline the accessible knowledge and the needed knowledge, really we use concept mapping activities. Concept mapping activities really means then you need to collect some keywords, which keywords is very important during the research. Try to find some connection between keywords, and really this type of activities help the students to forget their origin disciplines, to escape the cages of these disciplines, and as Professor Basarab Nicorescu told, beyond these disciplines. And really, and others, I'm really pleasured that almost every article I cited your work, publications, journal article and books, and it's my pleasure that I can meet you personally. I want to tell you this also. And for example, it's Hungarian because it was made by my Hungarian students, only some important things. And really I was proud when this concept map prepared, because I say tudományágak, it means science, and he's an engineer, and he mentioned, I need some element of knowledge on applied mathematics and informatics. I don't know which one. I don't know which one, the sign. Applied mathematics, and the second one is engineering, the third one is organizational behavior, and the fourth one is economics and financial. And on the top there's objectives, tools, project, and some success and so on. And really the exam of this subject, it's some workshop. Every student need to draw their own C-map, and we can see it in the screen, and everybody has to tell about it, and may I say suddenly we can see those students who get a real big picture in their mind. No, it's a very clear picture in my student's mind if he's able or she's able to draw this type of concept mapping. And really, this is a sample, and this activity is used during this subject. And yeah?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, it's enough. Thank you. And one last one, okay? And only some another things. What does it mean for me, especially for my research, transdisciplinary? Nowadays, I'm really interested in behaving, or according to Richard Thaler, maybe misbehaving the young generation, and to examine or to observe this behaving or misbehaving. I need not only decision making, not only economics, but any other great or powerful thinkers. For example, Richard Thaler, I mentioned, he's a Nobel Prize economics, but original psychologist, and Mark Prensky, who really defined firstly the digital natives, this concept, and I really based my research on Tapscott. I think some audience can know this name. The very famous book is titled Wikinomia, and this wiki philosophy, which is a very familiar things and behavior for younger generation. And for example, Nicholas Carr, who said that the younger generation has a shallow knowledge instead of older generation deep knowledge. And the last one, really the absolutely up-to-date book, is Howard Gardner and Katie Davis, who said it's not, we can say the younger generation can be defined an app generation, because also they use some application in their mobile phone. Thank you very much. Thanks for your